Look, we have a few minutes left for those who would like to ask a question of any one of the panellists, but if you do that, can you please, we're not here to diagnose your children or your parenting. Could you make it a very general question so that we can perhaps stimulate some more conversation? Do we have some microphones here? Is anyone brave enough to put their hand up? There we go, up the back.
You mentioned earlier that there hadn't been a lot of research done on what the optimum amount of time is for children to spend on their phones, and you said there are some guidelines available. Are you willing to share some general guidelines based on age as to how much time children should be spending either on iPads or phones or general social media interaction?
The guidelines that are out are based on best guesses. So we now, because technology's only been around for such a short period of time, we don't know what will happen over the life course. So if you can imagine that first slide that I put up, where in the future, through our longitudinal studies, we'll be able to understand what happens as a result of levels of exposure at a young age when young people are adults, and that's what those life course studies are showing. But in terms of recommendations, there is a view, and obviously it's a parenting decision, but there's a view that no more than 2 to 3 hours online, including homework, a day is not of value, is the most amount of time that young people should be engaged. Recognising that what does online mean? It doesn't mean sitting at a computer, perhaps as we do, that they're interacting constantly with their phones. It's more about the sorts of activities that they're doing in those online environments. So for example, if they're gaming, and gaming is obviously designed to keep young people engaged. It's built by psychologists who have built-in elements that lead to young people not wanting to leave the game because they're penalised, their friends are penalised. In that environment, a maximum of 1 hour online in gaming has been recommended by some experts who've been working in that area for young people to take a break, get away, because they can become too engrossed in that process. When you think of their homework, and I think for parents we're challenged because when I walk past my daughter, I'm doing my homework, Mum, but meanwhile there's several screens being flicked. There is this issue of multitasking, and young people are great at multitasking in the sense that they do it very regularly. The downside is that brain development research suggests that it's not possible to concentrate at the levels that you need to concentrate at when you are multitasking. So while they might be coping with having many screens operating at the same time, it's likely to affect the quality of their homework. So you might see your children saying something on their screen like POS when you walk by, and I don't know if any of you have ever noticed that nor even know what that acronym means. You would go to Lingo to Word to sort that. That means parent over shoulder. Whatever you're doing, don't send it anymore. And unfortunately, monitoring what young people are doing online is really tricky. So the recommendations are all technology in the kitchen after a certain time. Most people say after 9 o'clock. In a basket, including parents' technology as well. We've got to model what we are asking our children to do. In the hours prior to that, it's obviously a family decision, but no more than an hour sitting at a computer in any one solid break before you have a rest. Whether you're doing homework or not, it's important to have those regular rests. What they're doing online is obviously, again, up to us to be monitoring, not policing, just encouraging and supporting our children to make sure that they're getting the appropriate breaks. In terms of what age, where should that start to kick in? There are some experts who argue that around 8, 9 years of age, it should be only about half an hour in terms of blocks. If your children have phones at that age, you may want to restrict the number of hours that they have with contact with those phones. And there's, again, some recommendations by the eSafety Commissioner, the website that Jane showed earlier, with some suggestions about what age developmentally might children be more able to cope with a phone. Some suggest no younger than 13 years of age, but obviously it's a family decision when that might happen. But of course, phones these days are smartphones often, which means they can connect to the internet wherever children are. So putting precautions around some sort of monitoring device or some way to regulate where young people are going online might be helpful depending on the age of their children. But for children, certainly the young people tell us under 13 years of age, it's okay. Older than that, they know how to use a proxy server to get around any filters that you might have on any of your equipment in your home. So we need to be monitoring and watching what young people are doing. So I haven't given you a very clear answer because the evidence isn't clear enough, but they're the sorts of recommendations that are coming out of the literature. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Any other questions? One there? Down here. Oh, sorry, over here.
Thanks again for the presentation. It was fantastic. I probably just admitting my own internet ignorance, but Professor Belanger were talking about the availability of apps online and using them synergistically towards promoting mental health and well-being. This is probably my own ignorance. Is it that they can go online and it's kind of selected for them, or how do you go about advising your child to go online and select those apps which would benefit them best? Is that a reasonable question?
That is a reasonable question. I think it adds to the conversation that Donna started around what conversations do you have with your children as they develop and what's appropriate, and what conversations do you start to have as they hit their teenage years. So an organisation like reachout.com has really clear advice about, in the toolbox, what are the apps that would support well-being. And we've used a mobile app rating scale, which actually gives a rating scale on evidence-informed, not evidence-based. It's slightly different. What from our clinical knowledge and expertise would we be comfortable with? But also, what do young people like to use? And again, this sense of we can do the best research, we can create the best clinically based tools, but if young people aren't going to use them, then it really defeats the purpose. So the intent of something like a reachout.com, Headspace is another online resource that interfaces with Headspace, the local centres. They will talk specifically about the types of apps. I think interestingly in our conversations over the course of the day is young people are already finding they're going onto Apple stores, they're going onto Google Play, and they are looking for apps around stress management, around how do I manage my anxiety, around a whole host of topics. Young people are very smart, it is fair to say. And so having that constant conversation, not necessarily about how much screen time is the right amount of time, but rather what technologies are available, how do you use them, how do you use them safely, how do you get balance, what does it mean to get enough good sleep, when should we turn the technologies off so that you can actually go to sleep. I think they're the conversations that parents should be having, not you are only on for 2 hours or you are only on for 1 hour or there's this app that I want you to use, because that's, again, defeating the purpose of conversation. And to use an example, I grew up with mum and dad teaching me stranger danger. And we had a great big monster thing that used to come out to the school and teach you about what it means to keep yourself safe and to have a conversation. This is not new, this whole sense of danger or teaching young people about how to keep safe. It's just happening in a different environment. And I think the single most important skill for parents is not to forget that they are parents and that conversations matter and that having those conversations are really important.
Thanks, Jane. There's time for one last question. Down the front.
Thank you all. Really fascinating. My question is, do you think that as we enter a time where mobile technology is so ubiquitous, and wearables and connected Internet of Things devices all through our homes, and children doing work at school and at home, increasingly using technology to augment that. Do you think we might get to a point where it makes less sense to really think about recommendations in terms of time? How much time should they be using? How much time should they be connected or in front of screens? And looking at other metrics perhaps of how to evaluate perhaps what are they doing, or what are the various skills that are developing through those? And I guess the follow-up to that is, are we almost at that point even today where the time recommendation doesn't perhaps make as much sense?
In my view, yes. I don't think time is a good indicator. I think balance is a good indicator. I think conversations about how you're feeling and how is this supporting you to engage is a good indicator. I think to think back to your Sven Silbern's, big, complex, multifactorial, all of the things that impact on people and how that well they travel. Actually having conversations about, are you connecting? Is this of value? Are you participating? Does it feel meaningful to you? I mean, I think for example, in the world in which we work around young people with autism, many young people with autism previously would not have had jobs, would not have been valued, would not have been connected, would not have been participating, would not have been a part of society. Many of them would have been put away into institutions 20 or 30 years ago. Today, we are now acknowledging that people with very diverse life skills, such as those on the autism spectrum, actually have amazing means and capacity to be engaged and to be important to society. So I'd be looking at metrics like social connectivity, valued participation, well-being and relationships, balance around getting the impact between the online and the physical, all of those things that are far more meaningful rather than it's time. So.
Thanks, Jane. And with that, unfortunately, I am going to have to wrap it up. You've been very generous with your time to come this evening, so can I thank you very, very much for that. Just a reminder that we will send out some surveys and ask, is there anything more we could do for you based on what you've heard today? Is there something we could do a bit differently? But in saying all that, we have been really privileged to have, first of all, two of the most eminent professors in Australia telling us all about this particular issue. We're very, very fortunate to have them. And then two young people who have really shown that our young people of today are leaders and have the capacity if we allow them time and energy and support them. So can you please thank our great panel. And thank you, and please travel home safely. Thank you.